Hedgerow Hell was the name that the Americans gave to the Bocage country in France. So for those of you who don't know, all of this was after D-Day. This is why General Irwin Rommel, or Irving Rommel, depending on your dialect, which dialect you're using, was his great success. D-Day was Irvin Rommel's far more important command than Africa ever was. Rommel had intended to defeat the Allies at D-Day. He said none of them would ever reach the beach at all because he had intended to use Germany's nukes. And despite all of the Allied propaganda that you will find online or on YouTube, the Germans developed nuclear weapons. They deployed them at Kurland, Kurland, and that's the German. The English, or the anglicization, would be Courland, Kurland, and that is where a German nuclear weapon was deployed on a large V rocket with a nuclear warhead that destroyed the Soviet advance. It was, as a matter of fact, still held by the Germans after the fall of Berlin. You can look this up on maps. All of this is quite real. And so with the deployment of that nuclear weapon, it was Dr. Josef Mengele who approached Adolf Hitler and said that the unfortunate aspect is the radiation produced impacts everyone, no matter what their ethnicity or race. There is no immunity to radiation. And therefore, Hitler made the decision that no atomic weapons would ever be deployed in Europe, that this would be a threat to the genetics or future generations of Aryan man. And as a result, he had Rommel executed for trying to deploy nuclear weapons at the beaches at Normandy. But the Allies were well aware of the intention, having cracked the Enigma codes, and that's why they arrived on D-Day with Geiger counters in full preparation for nuclear war. There are many other factors I could go into with this, of course, and perhaps may do that right now simply because all of you who are listening don't necessarily know about everything that I've spoken of in the past. One of the reasons why they attack my channel nonstop is to prevent these facts from reaching you, our listener. And so when it comes to everything that you learn from us, understand that the deep state wants to stop you from ever learning any of this. And that they'll stop at nothing to do that. I have suffered assassination attempts. This is like something that I want people to appreciate, and I've gone into what happened in these assassination attempts before, and I want people to take that into account when they listen to what we have to say. What we have to share is what they're willing to kill to make certain nobody finds out. And so I appreciate what you're hearing, and I know a lot of you do. A lot of you do because you're supportive, and that's the only reason that I'm able to come back at all. So understand that when it came to World War II, and Erwin Rommel, he was thinking militarily, and he wanted to stop the Allies cold before they got to the beach, and his deployment of German nuclear weapons would have done that. Because of what the Germans had done at Kurland, basically what had happened was Kurland, again, Courland, spelled in the German Kurland. Kurland provided irrevocable evidence that the Third Reich had tested their atomic bomb via a cruise missile delivery sourcing from the Isle of Riga, Riga, near V2 Rocket Island, Rakatan Island. That's the V2 Rocket Island. 8 months before the end of the war, several months before Trinity. It was in October of 1944 that a mushroom cloud on the Baltic coastline. That would be, of course, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia are the Baltic nations. It was in Estonia, on the Baltic coastline, that the mushroom cloud, a full kilometer in diameter, formed with continuous internalization of combustion that led to electrical interference with instruments all the way to Great Britain and
Yes.
certainly in Berlin. Great Britain put all of its constables and fire departments and medical evacuation teams within the civil defense infrastructure on atomic alert. Understand that. And this was why the United States troops hit the D-Day beaches with Geiger counters. Now, there was later on an affidavit concerning the interrogation of Luftwaffe test pilots released during the Clinton administration, during the time that the Soviet Union was collapsed and they were basically releasing all those KGB files, that there was direct evidence of this before Putin took over and reclassified everything. But there was also the Polish war crimes affidavit of SS General Jacob Sporenberg, who testified about the reality of this German atomic bomb being deployed, which, of course, the Polaki, or Polish peoples, was trying to get classified as a war crime or categorized as such. This is something that, of course, the Allies prevented or did what they could to prevent because they didn't want to admit that the Germans had the bomb first. This is all part of their mythos around the bomb. But General Erwin Rommel, because Adolf Hitler would not allow him to use the bombs, had already cultivated what is called in-depth defense. In-depth defense, which meant that in France, he had hollowed out the hedgerows. So the hedgerows divided a good part of Normandy into these small, impenetrable fields. So building on this, General Erwin Rommel of the Afrika Korps, he had the German defenders preset mortar and artillery fire on the hedgerows in front of their strong points and laced the area with booby traps and mined obstacles and early warning devices and snipers, so that a U.S. Army infantryman rustling a leaf in the hot summer silence could bring sniper fire, the crack of artillery, the rip of machine gun fire. Each patch of farmland became its own miniature universe of battle. So this was probably one of the most extraordinary phases of the 20th century's greatest struggle, was the Allied forces storming Normandy to drive the Germans out of France. And even though their landing operation was successful, it only marked the very beginning of a long, bloody road ahead. Against all the hopes and desires of Allied commanders, the battle to break out of Normandy slogged on for 7 long, brutal weeks. All of this, even after the death of Erwin Rommel, Hitler had him executed because of his refusal to give up the idea of deploying atomic weapons, which Hitler felt would mutate generations of Europeans, people, and pollute the genes of Aryan man. But even in his death, Rommel's planning resulted in an expenditure of Allied lives and equipment that no one on the Allied side had ever anticipated. You know, through half 100 years, now say it's 80 years, through 80 years of military history, Operation Cobra has generally been overshadowed by the events on the Normandy landing itself. But you have to ask why. Because more than 10 times the howitzer rounds were used during Operation Cobra, the breakout from the beaches, than in the beach landing itself. The British lost 32% of their entire armored force in Europe. Psychiatric casualties rose 400%. Just one of the many offensives cost the Americans over 40,000 casualties. And furthermore, the little that has been written on the subject really betrays a flawed understanding of the battle as a whole. Traditional studies claim that the Allies' superior air power and tactics and logistics ruled the day. All Allied propaganda. Bradley's decision to initiate a bombing raid close to his own lines resulted in one of the worst cases of fratricide, friendly fire, what they call target blue or blue on blue killing of Americans killing each other in American history. Yet the Americans propagandize Operation Cobra as a strategic success, surely as a result of operational flexibility, not any better planning. But when it comes to what Erwin Rommel did, he did all the planning, and the Allies paid the price. So even in death, he beat the Americans. You can imagine what he could have done if he was still alive. A true god of war, but at the same time, too much of a god of war to take into account the impact of civilians on civilians of nuclear weapons. And thus Hitler had him executed for what Hitler thought was good reason. I understand my biological father's decision to do that. People might not understand it, but that's because they have no idea of the situation and what was really going on. They're stuck in Allied propaganda world.